I'd like to welcome everyone to this hybrid meeting of the Planning Committee. This planning meeting is broadcast live over the internet and will be available to view online now and in the future. We welcome the use of the Welsh language at meetings, but I have had no request for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. Those attending in the chamber, please be aware that we are all on camera and you may be visible on screen when people around you are speaking. And please remember to speak clearly into your microphones. Committee members participating remotely, can you please refrain from using the chat function and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you want to speak. Please remember to keep your microphone muted when you are not talking. Thank you. Moving on to the agenda. Agenda item 1, attendance and apologies. Geraint, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we've got apologies from Councillors Hugh Bevan, Ron Burnett, John Haller and Keith James.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Geraint, could you please ask members in alphabetical order to state whether they have any interest to declare?
Yep, no problem, Chair. I'll just go through the list now. If I can start with Councillor Ashley.
Item number 5, it's in the Cwmbran, yes, it is in Cwmbran area, so it's obviously the usual Cwmbran Community Council declaration.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Bevan and Burnett, apologies. I can't see Councillor Constance in the meeting. I don't think he's joined. Councillor Crick?
None that I'm aware of, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Evans?
None that I'm aware of at the moment, thank you.
Thank you. I don't believe Councillor Haller is in the meeting. Oh no, I've given apologies to him, sorry, Chair. Councillor Gaynor-James?
Yes, could I declare interest in item number 6 and number 7 as a member of Pontypool Community Council, please?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jenkins?
Nothing that I'm aware of.
Thank you. Councillor Fay-Jones?
Could I declare an interest in item number 5, Cwmbran Community Council?
Thank you. Councillor Janet Jones?
Nothing that I'm aware of, Geraint.
Thank you. Councillor O'Connell?
No, nothing to declare, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Parish?
Yes, I'd like to declare personal non-prejudicial interest in items 6 and 7 as I'm a member of Pontypool Community Council.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, it's just agenda item 5 because in my ward.
Okay, that's everybody, Chair.
Thank you, Geraint. We'll move on to agenda item 3. Minutes of the Planning Committee from the 20th of January 2022. Members, could you possibly state whether you have anything to raise in relation to the minutes? No? If not, I'll take them as approved. Everyone agreed with that? Thank you. We move on to item 4. Proposed changes to Appendix 9, Scheme of Delegation of the Council's Constitution. Can I ask Richard Lewis, Head of Planning and Development, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. I'm hoping the report is fairly self-explanatory, but basically there's 3 matters that it covers. And the first is an update to the Constitution to clarify the functions between myself as the Chief Planning Officer and Rachel Jowett as the Chief Officer for Neighbourhoods, just to clarify those functions that need to be rationalised. The second thing is minor changes to the wording of clauses E, F and G of Appendix 9. And Appendix 9 is shown as Appendix B of this report, but it basically relates to members or certain members of the staff who are applicants of planning applications. All of those changes are in the revised version of Appendix 9, which, as I say, is Appendix B of this report. And the last one, members may recall that at the start of the COVID pandemic, we introduced some measures to give increased delegated powers because we weren't certain at the time how well committees would be run. They were virtual for quite a long time, as you know. Now that we are doing hybrid committees, there is now no longer any need to have those extended arrangements in place. So we're now proposing to cease that. And Appendix B, which is new Appendix 9, reflects those changes as well. We go back to that basically, and all the special measures end. Thank you, Chair.
You're on mute.
Chair, you're on mute. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for that. Geraint, I can see Stuart Ashley's hand up now. Stuart, do you want to ask a question?
Not really. All I say is nobody's asking any questions, so just move it, please.
Right.
I second it, Chair. Yeah.
Thank you. My hand has gone up. I don't know why that's gone up. Thank you. So we've all agreed on that. Item 5 now. Planning application 19/P/731/FUL, retention of new 2.2 metre high palace height type security fence at Cumbran Stadium Sports Centre, Pentless Way, Cumbran. Can I ask Tanya Leck, planner, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen. Okay, yeah. Sorry, that's just catching up there. Yeah, so this is an application to retain a 2.2 metre high security fence at Cumbran Stadium. So I'll just show here the site location plan. So you may be familiar with this site, but here is the stadium building. There's an athletics track with football pitches within the site, and another football pitch and the car park here. There's also some playing fields to the east of the site. So the application is for a new security fence which encloses the athletics track and the associated pitches within this area. This plan shows the replacement fence that went in. And then there is one section which is a new area of fencing, which is shown here, and this is along the rear of residential properties at Oakfield Road. So here's just an aerial view just to show that a bit more clearly. So the fence follows this conifer line around here, and the former fence followed it down to the back of the residential boundaries here, and this was open. What has been done is a fence has been put along here. You can see the faint line on the aerial view, but this plan shows it in a bit more detail. So you can see it's set back from the boundaries between 2 and 4 metres. This section was originally left open for access, but has since been enclosed following feedback from the residents. You can just see some photos there of the fence line in the area that's now been closed. So here's just a few photographs. You can see this, the former fence, which was also 2.2 metres. They had issues with break-ins and antisocial behaviour, which prompted the need for the new security fencing. Here's just some more images just to show different elevations. And then this is the new fence that's been erected to the rear of the residential properties. So you can see it is on sloping land, so it is a little bit higher. This you can just see in the corner there where it was previously left open for access, but as mentioned earlier, that's subsequently been closed.
Thank you, Tanya. I can see one hand up. Stuart Ashley, would you like to ask your question?
A couple of questions. I noticed that we haven't had any views from the landscaping officer, and anybody that knows Cumbran Stadium knows that it's obviously a landscape significant landscaped area for Cwmbran. One is why we didn't get anything back on that, because I have several questions about the fact. My concern about it is from a point of view of the area, that it hasn't got better ecology on it, because you've got a fence goes round, and I've got no problem with the fence, to be quite honest, because it's a similar thing to the rugby ground, which is the other stadium I can think of in the borough. It looks like it, and the problem you have is you've got a running track. You don't really want people going. You have to have a security problem, and it's pretty standard what you're doing at a 2.5 metre fence round most. Whatever this fence is, it's the standard one you get around most sports grounds, and then obviously security and all the issues is pretty standard to most sports grounds. But the fact that we got the trees there and the grassed area, I would have thought they would have made something more of that, partly from security and partly from well-being future generations. The security and that aspect together, they could have made a bit more of it. I'm only making that comment because the stadium actually, is a significant asset, both from Leisure Trust and from Torfaen, because we're still the owners of it, as far as I know. Just to make that question, because the fence itself doesn't look too bad for one of those, although a fence is a fence. The other question I was, because the residents have asked it, why have they moved the line of the fence from the boundary to that it doesn't look, it's a funny line, the fence round about the Oakfields, that area, because it's kind of moved off the boundary. I've had some experience personally with these type of fences around school grounds, which is the other place to get this type of fence. So it's just, that's a question of interest rather than me being critical about it, because I don't blame the stadium that want to put this fence around like they are. Does that make sense what I've said there?
Thank you. Tanya, can you reply to that, please?
Yeah, of course. So just to touch on the first point, so just for clarification, the fence is 2.2 metres high.
2.2, sorry, yes. Yeah. 8 foot, also, no money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Share my screen again, just. So you were talking about it following, or the landscape impact. So it predominantly follows this conifer line, which does soften the appearance of the fence. I think I've got a photo. Here you can see there are some gaps, but overall it blends as much as it can do into this vegetation line. Also, this was predominantly the location of the former fence, so in terms of what else we could require them to do, this is deemed acceptable as a replacement fence. In terms of the rear boundaries, so it's a good point. This perhaps looks odd, but the reason why is this was previously open. So these residential properties could come straight out from their back gardens into the stadium. Which it is covered in the report. There was a legal right of access, which has subsequently been ceased, but for a number of reasons, this needed to be enclosed so that the whole site is enclosed, really. So, for example, from a fire safety perspective, with residents able to come in and out, they never had an accurate number of people in the building. So it was moved, it wasn't run all the way along the rear of these properties so that they could maintain their pedestrian accesses. A lot of these are terrace properties, so there is a gate just to the camera here on the left, or it's at the bottom. So if they need to bring things in and out of their garden, they've still maintained that. That's why it was set back.
I see. Can I just comment on this, if I may? Because in another place, I'm chair of allotments, and this sort of practice was practiced, as the chair will know, because she's also on this. This sort of practice was practiced on allotments. It was something that happened in past times where people actually had gates into allotments, and it was a similar problem in a way. So I'm sympathetic to what they're trying to achieve. It's just the line you had rights into property that we owned and formerly owned, and now I understand that. And obviously there are footpaths and wayleaves and all sorts of odd things around the place. But then in an age when you want security, I can see what the problem is. Thank you for that.
Right, thank you. David, do you want to ask a question?
No, Chair, I didn't really want to ask a question. I think the report is self-explanatory, and I was just going to move it with to approve with the conditions the officers have put in place.
Right,
I'll second that, Chair.
I'll second that.
Right, we've got Jason. Have you got a question?
Yeah, just a quick one, really. The photos that have been shown, the fence there looks pretty new, pretty good condition. Is that all planned to be removed and replaced with something else? And if it is, can we make use of that old fence by giving it to another council-owned site, to somewhere like Lucas Girling Sports Ground, who will have particular problem with access?
Yeah. Good point.
Tanya, can you answer?
Yeah. Sorry for any confusion. This is retrospective, so that new fencing that you're seeing is being considered. I think one of the photos showed the old concrete and weld mesh fence, but the green palisade fencing is the fence we're considering.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you. I can't see any other hands up. Now, it's been proposed and seconded. So shall we go into the vote? Geraint, could you please ask members in alphabetical order to state where they are for, against or abstaining, please?
No problem, Chair. If I can start with Councillor Ashley.
For.
Councillor Crick.
For.
Councillor Evans.
For.
Councillor James.
For.
Councillor Jenkins.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Faye Jones.
For.
Councillor Janet Jones.
For.
Councillor O'Connell.
For.
Councillor Parish.
For.
And Councillor Thomas.
For.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. So this application has been approved. Right, we move on to agenda item 6, planning application 21/P/0964/FUL, and it's for alterations to front elevation to create new entrances to existing ground floor takeaway with internal alterations to create new two-bed HMO on the upper floors of 77 Commercial Road, Talawayne, NP4 7HX. Can I ask Claire Hall, Senior Planner, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Just checking, can everyone see the presentation screen? Yeah.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. This is an application site in the middle of Talawayne. It's a mid-terraced property. The proposal is, hang on if I can. Yeah. Play, I think. Right, okay. So there's an existing hot food takeaway on the ground floor, okay, and a residential flat above. The proposal is to modify the entrance arrangements. Currently, the access to the upper floor residential area is through the shop or through the part of the storage area of the shop. They're proposing to put in a new separate entrance point so that the access to the upper floor residential area is separated from the ground floor shop. The internal layout, apart from the new staircase, doesn't change that much. It's more obvious from the photographs. So this is the existing shop. There's an access to a communal store area, and at the back of the store area is a staircase up into the residential area. They're proposing to relocate the access to the shop and have the communal area separate, so that there's a separate entrance to the shop area and a separate area to the upper floor with a new staircase. And if I can go back, so whereas previously I should put the photos before the plans. Apologies for that. So yeah, whereas previously you'd walk through the store, up through the shop into the residential area, now the residential area would have its own front door, go straight up the stairs to the residential area above, and there's separate areas there for storage of bins, etc. But ultimately, it's about separating the existing residential use from the ground floor takeaway, and for it to be used for a house in multiple occupation. So members will recall we've had this issue before where at the moment the use is for a single family unit for people who live together as a single household. The proposal is to change that use so that the upper floor is used as a HMO, and this rear balcony area, which is access from the first floor, is where they'd have their clothes dry in, and the bin storage would be inside the store area, separate from the shop. The recommendation is for approval.
Thank you, Claire. Gwen, I can see your hand up.
Claire, in that shop shut, and they've been shut, that takeaway been shut, they've been shut for a long time?
It has, yes, but it has a long-standing lawful planning use as an A3 takeaway. So the fact that it's been closed doesn't fetter the lawful use of the building. They're entitled to reopen, subject to obviously their separate licensing from a food hygiene point of view, but from a planning position, there's been no intervening use that would fetter the lawful use of the ground floor.
Yeah, it's been closed a long time, so hopefully it'll return to being a takeaway again. Okay, thank you, Claire.
Thank you. Steve, you've got a question?
Yeah, reading a report, can I ask what they're doing about the fire exits and the fire safety within there? Because that's been mentioned on page 39 and page 40.
Yeah, it's again, this is an issue that's come up before. Really, they're having to alter the sort of means of escape situation, obviously, because the residential will now be separate from the takeaway. But actually, that's probably better from a fire point of view, because you won't have to go through the shop to escape from the upper floors. So there would need to be a separate building regulations application for all those details. But from a planning point of view, you probably wouldn't really notice the change, certainly from an external point of view, apart from the garage door will now be 2 pedestrian doors. To all intents and purposes, the building will function pretty much as it has in the past. But obviously they'd have to have modern standards in terms of means of escape. There is an issue with, I think, a previous owner sold the land at the back so that they don't have access through the back anymore. So that's potentially an issue that they need to sort out. But I think that's part of why they're looking to modify the alterations from the front, so that residents can get out safely from the front elevation if needed.
Yes, thank you for that. And also I was going to ask, which you've probably covered now, is the impact onto the property behind, because that's mentioned on page 40 regarding that fire exit, the detrimental effect can have on the other property.
Well, I think there are some legal issues that maybe the new owner needs to sort out in terms of what rights of access, if any, that there are from the upper floor. I think from a planning point of view, it would have been preferable if they'd had some sort of area of land at the back. But we can't overrule any sort of conveyance law that may have been in existence from a previous transaction there. So I think from a planning point of view, it's mainly to do with a change of occupation. So, a single family could go in there without needing planning permission, and they'd have the same issues in terms of lack of rights of access to land at the back as a house in multiple occupation.
Okay, thanks for that, Claire.
Right, thank you. Dave, you've got a question?
Chair, no, again, it's not a question. I think the report is self-explanatory and a very thorough one again, and I was going to just move it for the approval with conditions.
Right, is there a second?
I'll second that, Chair.
Right, thank you. Right, we'll hold on a minute because Janet's got a question, I think. You're muted, Janet.
The question I was going to raise has already been addressed. Thanks, Chair.
Oh, thank you. Right, it's been moved and seconded. So, Geraint, could you please ask members in alphabetical order to state whether they are for, against or abstaining?
No problem, thank you, Chair. If I can start with Councillor Ashley.
For.
Councillor Crick.
For.
Councillor Evans.
For.
Councillor James.
For.
Councillor Jenkins.
For.
Councillor Faye Jones.
For.
Councillor Janet Jones.
For with the conditions.
Councillor O'Connell.
For.
Councillor Parish.
For.
And Councillor Thomas.
For.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. So this application has been approved. So we'll move to agenda item 7, planning application 21/P/0985/FUL, and it's for the change of use and internal refurbishment of the existing listed building to provide 16 affordable housing apartments at 1 Pearl House, Hanbury Road, Pontypool, NP4 6JL. So could I ask Claire Hall, again Senior Planner, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. This is obviously a site that most people working at Torvine know very well. It's dead opposite the Civic Centre. A lot of colleagues have worked in there at various times. The application is to convert the upper floors from the vacant office space into new residential flats. There are some works at the basement to the rear, but the 3 existing retail units are not affected. It's mainly the upper floors, and this is the basement area at the rear, which you can't see from obviously the Hanbury Road side. There are some minor modifications to the front based on the internal layouts, but there's also a separate listed building application which goes into more detail as to the works that are being proposed to the listed building, both internally and externally. But these are the plans purely from a planning point of view, just to show how minimal the alterations are, really. There's some brick vents and some alterations to windows and some panels. But in the main, the main part of the building is effectively going to be just refurbished and made good. There is flat roof behind the parapet on which they're proposing some solar panels, which we'll come on to. So this is the proposed layout, basically. So these are that's one shop, and there's another 2 shops here that they haven't surveyed. So this is the Hanbury Road frontage. So what they're proposing is that you use the main access from Hanbury Road up to the stairwell. So you go down to there's one flat on the ground floor, and you go down to 3 flats in the basement, but they've all got rear-facing windows to provide obviously some light and outlook because they're in the basement. And then at the other side of the building, where the existing gates are, they're proposing bin storage and cycle parking for the residents. There'll be some as a condition requiring more details of the bin storage, because obviously we have to make sure that the existing retail waste arrangements can be managed as well. So moving up then from that main stairwell to the first floor, there's some additional flats on the first floor, and then some additional flats on the second floor. And then on the flat parapet wall around roof, they're proposing some new solar panels. The technical detail goes into more detail on the separate planning, on the separate listed building application. Sorry, but from a planning point of view, it's just to note that they're proposing these new solar panels on the roof to try and help improve the energy efficiency of the building. They've got some wider issues in terms of construction and cavity and insulation all goes into much more detail on the separate listed building application. But from a planning point of view, it's really just the solar panels that you need to worry about in terms of external impact. Like I said, some minor alterations to some of the facade where there's some dummy panels needing to go in, all of which needs to have more detail from a listed building point of view. But just to contrast the front and rear elevations, the front is considered to be the most significant element in terms of its impact on the, other listed buildings and obviously the wider conservation area. It's a very impressive building within the streetscape, and this is largely going to be unchanged to accommodate the new use. The solar panels won't be seen from the ground. Colleagues who have offices in the upper floor of the Civic will probably be able to see them looking down, obviously because of the topography, but certainly they won't be seen from the ground or the lower levels, Pontypool Park behind, for example. And this is just an indication of what was, it was an office, so it looks like an office. It's got all these suspended ceilings and strip lights. There's all these cast iron radiators and things which we're looking to control on the detailed listed building side of any special features like that. But certainly from a planning point of view, it's good to see vacant upper floors within the town centre being brought into use. And it ticks all the boxes in terms of, sustainable location, good size, flats they have to be to get the Welsh Government grant for affordable housing, and it will bring the listed building hopefully safeguarded for future generations. So the recommendation is for approval.
Thank you, Claire. The first hand I saw up, it's in the chamber. Is there a question from the chamber?
Yeah, no, it's not a question, Chair. I welcome this application. This sort of accommodation is very much needed, and it's making use of a fabulous building. And when you've got places like that in a town to use up as accommodation I think is fantastic. And it also hopefully brings a bit of money into the town as well when they're shopping. So I just want to welcome this one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gaynor. Right, the next hand was Stuart Ashley. Stuart?
Yeah, I totally echo what Gaynor says, and she's a member for the area. The thing is, I know the building well. I can't believe I've actually been to meetings in all floors of it, including the basement. TVA used to be in there, funnily enough. What strikes you, and it's I did an architectural appreciation course. This building, it didn't look it, but the Lloyd Wright, I believe, is the architecture, of Bauhaus, whichever you take your pick. You can probably tell me which of these it is. That's why it got it. It's a modernist building. There's a few of them around the borough. There's a few down that street as well. And if you go to where Chair used to work, I believe over in Park Davis, that's the other big building we got like that, which this planning committee went round. Goitra, Mylad, as I'm thinking of, they're of that era. What I'm concerned to see with this building, if it's repurposed, that it's repurposed with that in mind, and it's a complete repurposing. Bear in mind when we went round, Chair used to work with my mileage, she knows what I'm on about. Yeah. It's not just the architecture, it's the paint, it's the stuff that goes in there, and you've mentioned it in this report. It's the colour. The problem with that street, Commercial Street, which I know well because I used to run a building down there, is I believe it says about this building is not a Victorian building, so the paint job on it, the look on it is of the early 20th century Bauhausian colours, Lloyd Wright architecture. Look, I could go hours on this because it's actually a marvellous building. It has to be sympathetic and work within. Is it grade 2 listing that we got on there? In that, if anybody starts putting plastic in, it's very similar to the problem you've got in Blaenavon. And how we ensure that for this building in its period, have we got a conservation officer looking this one over? Because I know we share one with Monmouth. That's how we onto this one. Really do need that bit there as well to make sure you said about the radiators, it's those windows, it's the glass, and not having lumps of plastic stuck on the front, because that building, as you said, can be seen all over the place. It's a lovely building. Might not be to everybody's taste, but that's not the important thing. 100 years' time, that building sat there, it still has to sit there and look like it does. I've got no problem with the flats and all the rest of it. That's a damn good use to it. We've still got the shops down the bottom there. What are we going to be doing with the shop fronts? Because you can do shop fronts in and integrate them in without making them look like 20th century aluminium jobs. So I asked those questions because you do raise it in the report. I'd be interested to hear what the solutions are.
Right, thank you. Can you comment on those, Claire, please?
Yeah, sure. Just to give you an indication, really. So as part of the submission, there is this detailed heritage impact assessment document. And our own in-house conservation officer, Patricia Martin, has had a lot of input into this from a listed building point of view. There's a very, very detailed document, which is on our website for you to have a look, which goes through, can you see where I'm scrolling?
Yes, yes.
So it identifies all the areas of significance. So the things that you talked about, like the windows and the rainwater goods and the colour of the building, all goes into details where we've identified what's important, what's less important. So this is what we've got, this traffic light type approach to, where we can sort of make some improvements without it compromising, the reason for the listing. And then there's other things where, and I think it's mainly the front, so that, the windows at the front are all going to be refurbished. There's a bit more scope to replace them on the rear, but it goes into all this technical detail. If you see the rulers that they're measuring the thickness of the glazing bars, so there's an awful lot of detail that's gone into this, which is subject to the separate listed building application. Okay, so I just pulled out the sort of main summary things from a planning point of view, but to give members the assurance that there's a separate listed building application which drills down a lot deeper, and so the front, for example, is not going to be painted. It's going to be cleaned with a specialist cleaning method, so it doesn't damage the paint or the stonework. That is all in there, and there's a number of conditions where we're still requiring further details as well. The conditions in the report for a planning point of view are things that just affect the exterior. There are going to be more in terms of it affects the interior as well. So we've got a condition, if members approve the planning application on the separate listed building application, for a full survey record to be undertaken of the interior in its entirety, so that we can identify all the things that are of significance, so that we don't end up losing things by accident. Everything's going to be thought through to make sure that the reason for the listing and the significant elements of the building remain as they are.
Thank you. Can I reply to that a bit, Chair, for me?
If you're quick.
I'm going to be quick. No, I'm very comforted to hear that, is what I'm going to say. And from the developer's point of view, I would have thought that was a selling point if they were going to do apartments, because at the end of the day, that is the quality of the building, and it's one of the buildings in the place that would presumably sell itself on the features. I like my mileage, because that is exactly why these buildings are important. I'll leave it there, Chair.
Right, thank you, Stuart. Jason, you're next on the list.
No, I'm broadly happy. Claire's last answer, my last question, which was on chemical cleaning for the front of the building, just to make it look revitalised. There's nothing not to like about this application, so it'll have my full support.
Right, thank you. Janet's next.
Claire's answered my question because I was concerned about the internal fixtures in the building. My only other one question is probably going to be self-explanatory. The impact we could have about the families using it on our education system and our schools. Do we anticipate that there may be a donation towards the facilities and the services for education contribution?
I think if you're reading the report, Councillor, the education said that there's already enough capacity within the existing schools within the catchment for us not to be requiring a contribution to education provision in this case. That's all set out in the heads of terms of what we can reasonably ask for under the planning obligations, supplementary planning guidance that we work with.
Thank you, Claire. I mean, reading through and listening to everyone, I think it's a really good venture and a step forward, and I would support the application.
Thank you, Janet. Veronica, you are next on my list.
Thank you, Chair. Can I say I feel this is a very full application in terms of the details that we are given, as Councillor Jones has just pointed out. You know, the information we've got in here from the Conservation Officer answers so many questions that many of us have. I note that Mellin Homes is developing the site, which I think is another positive. What I wasn't clear entirely about was whether this is intended to be apartments, some of which would be for sale, others of which would be for social housing. So it would be helpful, Claire, if you could just advise us on that.
No problem, Councillor. I think the intention is for it to be 100% affordable, but in terms of the council's planning obligations, we can only insist on a 25% minimum. But the Section 106 agreement would detail the affordable housing requirements, and obviously, if they were to, I think there's a public grant funding attributed to Mellin's interest in this site, so that may very well be the answer as to, you know, there being more affordable housing. You know, the intention is for 100%, but the 106 would only require the minimum that we could, you know, legitimately ask for. So even if the rest were private market, I think the viability of the site is going to be a critical factor as to, you know, what public funding they can help to get to make the scheme viable will, I think, dictate how much, you know, will be private and how much will be social housing. There is also an element that is going to be used for emergency accommodation for Torfaen, which is obviously, you know, needed within borough, and this is a good central location for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, you are next on my list.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Nice to be on your list. Where you said about the integrated function, perhaps with a heritage officer, what involvement with Cadwa? I know Cadwa put it as a listed building, but would they have any follow-up to make sure things were put in place which should have been? You know, because that's vitally important for our heritage for that particular building.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Two elements to that. I think our conservation officers work really hard in liaising with CADU on the merits of this site and this scheme. But ultimately, the listed building application would, you know, if we were minded to approve that, you know, so we're looking at this application first from a planning point of view. If we then minded to approve the separate listed building application, which is virtually the same, but obviously goes into much more detail on the technical elements, that would need to go to CADU for their approval anyway. So they would have a look at that in detail before any listed building consent could be granted.
Okay, Steve.
Yeah, no, thanks for that comprehensive answer.
I've got my hand back up again, Chair.
Yes, I can see it. You're next, Stuart.
Yeah, I do know the site really well. What I was interested in was the exterior at the rear. You've got Pontypool Library next to it. Down the back of it is the river course. I believe there was some work done in the past because I was involved in consultation when I was running coming down there about the access at the what access there is at the rear, because you've got the Avon Lloyd going down there. I wonder what work had been done on that, if any, because there is sort of tree line down the back of there. I don't know if there's a path down there these days or not. Also, we had the conversation about the bats. I know Steve Williams has said that bats have walked away at the moment, but they could always come back because it's a problem, as the chair knows, for Pontypool Community Council. Possibly the bats kind of visit along there to various premises. They've got the thing in the so-called in the other building there with bats. So I noticed what he says about that. I wasn't going to get worked up about the bats. What was concerning me was the rear aspect over the avenue to the and what is happening out the back there, because that's obviously an asset to anybody there, or not an asset, depending on how you work it. I have had experience of various buildings down that row there.
Yeah,
it's not mentioned in the report very much, other than looking at the back.
Yeah, well, they have submitted a tree survey and a bat survey, obviously, and they have our ecologists have looked at it from that point of view. So there are no plans to affect any of the the vegetation along there, and there's certainly no vehicular access or anything like that. So I think it's more a question of there might be some maintenance work just to make that outlook for people, certainly in the basement area, sort of have a pleasant outlook, really, so onto the sort of trees and the river there. But the main sort of activity will be from the front. The bins will be going out from the front, the cycle parking will be going to and from the front, as will the main pedestrian access into the building. So, the rear isn't really of a part of this application as such, other than the setting to which the people living in the apartments would be looking out onto.
Can I just quickly come back to you, because there was, still is, I think, underneath that building a tunnel.
Oh.
Yeah, I wondered about that. The tramway tunnel goes actually under the building. I wondered about this because if you go round into the Italian garden, you will find this. It's quite well known, and it actually goes underneath there, and it used to come out in Rosemary Lane. And I wondered whether anybody had looked into that.
I'm not aware of that.
No, it's quite well known to anybody. It just struck me because that's been there all the time, and all these buildings got that thing going under them.
Okay, well, that might be something that we possibly need to follow up on your local knowledge on that.
Because you go around, it's around the back there. But no, this is why I said this. And at the point, if you're a local kid, you know how to go down the back of those buildings and come out the other end as well. There's a lot of scrubby sycamore trees and things down the back. Okay, I won't go any more about this, but just bring that to your attention. Because when I was a lot fitter than I am now, you could actually go quite a bit down the way there.
I will certainly mention the tunnel to the conservation officer, because that does sound something that we of interest.
They've shut it off, but it just got quite a way into it, and I wonder whether it was under that, because there's a whole lot of stuff underneath that street there. Okay, I'm not going to go any more into that.
Right, thank you. Dave, then Faye.
Chair, again, it's a very good report. It's supported by the ward member, so I would wholeheartedly support this, and I recommend to approve.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
I'll second that, Chair.
Right, thank you. Faye, do you still want to speak?
I think it's an excellent idea. I just want to ask about residents with cars.
They'll either won't come there or they'll park in a public car park. Town centre living is what it is. It's for some people. It's not for others. So there is no space for cars on the site. So it'll either persuade people that that's not the site for them, or they'll say they're quite happy to park their car and leave that a bit further afield.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, it's been moved and seconded. Geraint, could you please ask members in alphabetical order to state whether they are for, against or abstaining, please?
Yeah, no problem, Chair. If I can start with Councillor Ashley.
For.
Councillor Crick.
For.
Councillor Evans.
For.
Councillor James.
For.
Councillor Jenkins.
For.
Councillor Faye Jones.
For.
Councillor Janet Jones.
For.
Councillor O'Connell.
For.
Councillor Parish.
For.
And Councillor Thomas.
For.
Thank you all. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you, Geraint. This application has been approved, and that's the last item on the agenda for today. So I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance and contributions, and I'll now close the meeting. And I'd like to say too, the next planned meeting is Thursday, 14th of April. Thank you.
Thank you all. Do anyone